The old train car groaned under the weight of the heavy rain. Water dripped from the rusted iron ceiling. Maya stared at her hands, covered in grease and soot. Her fingers trembled slightly from the cold. Everything she owned was now crammed into this metallic tomb. The wind howled through the cracks of the abandoned railway yard. Was this the end of her family's legacy? She had nothing left but this rusted shell. Her cousins had taken the family estate. They used forged documents and corrupt lawyers to cast her out. She was penniless. The cold iron of the floorboards felt like a mockery of her past. Her grandfather had always told her that the railway held the family's true destiny. But looking around at the peeling paint and broken glass, those words felt like a cruel joke. How could a ruined caboose save her from starvation? The rain grew louder, pounding against the metal hull. Maya huddled closer to her small lantern. The flame flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across the decayed interior. The air smelled of damp earth, rust, and decades of forgotten journeys. She needed to fix the floor before the night storm worsened. Every draft felt like ice piercing her skin. She grabbed a rusted crowbar from her toolbox. Her muscles ached with every movement. This train car had sat on the edge of the abandoned northern lot for 40 years. Local townsfolk said it was cursed. They claimed old Arthur Lynn had lost his mind before he died inside it. But Maya knew her grandfather wasn't crazy. He was careful. Too careful. She knelt down on the rotting wood. The floorboards were warped, uneven, and slick with moisture. One particular plank near the back corner caught her eye. It didn't match the rest of the grain. It was slightly elevated, as if resisting the weight of the world. Why would a single board remain unrotted after all this time? She wedged the crowbar beneath the seam. The wood shrieked in protest. Dust and dried splinters flew into the damp air, making her cough. She pushed down with all her remaining strength. The wood split, but beneath it lay something unexpected. It wasn't just dirt or structural iron, it was a secondary layer of polished dark walnut wood. A hidden compartment? The crowbar slipped, scraping against her palm. Maya didn't care about the pain. She stared into the narrow gap she had just forced open. The polished wood beneath the floorboards was completely dry. No water had touched it in decades. A faint, sweet scent of cedar and old paper drifted up from the darkness. She reached her hand into the tight opening. Her fingers brushed against cold metal. It wasn't a pipe. It was a heavy, industrial-sized padlock securing an iron-bound latch. The lock was pristine, devoid of any rust or wear. Someone had sealed this space with absolute intent. But who? She shimmed the crowbar deeper, using the metal frame of the train car as leverage. With a loud metallic snap, the old latch gave way. The false floorboards lifted like a heavy hatch. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Her lantern light spilled into a deep, reinforced cavity running the entire length of the caboose. Inside the chest sat 12 heavy, rectangular objects wrapped in oiled burlap. Beside them lay a thick leather binder bound with a heavy brass clasp. Maya reached for the smallest burlap package first. It was incredibly heavy for its size. She peeled back the greasy fabric. The golden glow of the lantern hit the metal. It wasn't iron. It wasn't brass. The brilliant, unmistakable luster of pure gold reflected in her wide eyes. It was a solid bullion bar stamped with the official seal of the Imperial Railway Authority dated 1946. There were dozens of them, a fortune hidden in plain sight. But the gold wasn't the only thing there. Her trembling hands reached for the leather binder. As she opened the first page, her grandfather's sharp, elegant handwriting stared back at her. The ink was faded but perfectly legible. It began with a warning. To whoever finds this, the land you stand on is a lie. The people who took it from us do not know what truly lies beneath the tracks. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. The storm outside seemed to fade into a dull hum. She looked out the cracked window toward the distant lights of the main estate. Her cousins were there right now, celebrating their stolen inheritance. They thought they had won. They thought they had left her to freeze to death in a worthless piece of junk. Suddenly, a sharp snap sounded outside the train car, the sound of heavy footsteps breaking twigs. Maya froze. She extinguished her lantern immediately. The darkness swallowed the caboose. Through the cracked window, she saw a flashlight beam cutting through the torrential rain. Someone was approaching the railway yard. Were they looking for her, or were they looking for what she had just found? Maya pressed her back against the cold steel wall. She held her breath as the flashlight beam swept across the rusted exterior of the car. The footsteps paused just outside the heavy sliding door. A low, gruff voice muttered something into a radio, but the thunder drowned out the words. After a tense minute, the light moved away, disappearing into the tree line toward the old town hall. She waited until her heart stopped hammering against her ribs. She couldn't stay in the dark forever. Relighting the lantern on its lowest setting, she turned back to the leather binder. She needed answers. She needed to know why her grandfather had buried an empire under a ruined train car. The pages detailed a dark history. In the 1950s, her grandfather, Arthur Lynn, wasn't just a railway foreman. He was the keeper of the regional transit vault. The journal explained how the local town council, led by her cousin's grandfathers, had planned to seize the railway lands through a series of forced foreclosures and manufactured debts. They wanted to build a massive commercial hub over the old tracks. But there was a catch. The land didn't belong to the town. It belonged to a private trust established by the founders of the state. Arthur had discovered that the town leaders were forging deeds to sell the land to foreign developers. To protect the true wealth of the valley, Arthur smuggled the reserve gold out of the central vault night by night, using this exact caboose. As she turned the yellowed pages, an old newspaper clipping fell out. The headline read, "The Mystery of the Vanishing Trainmaster." The article described how Arthur Lynn had been publicly disgraced, accused of losing his mind, and burning his own records. It was all a setup. The town leaders had ruined his reputation to invalidate any legal claims he might make. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. Her grandfather hadn't been a madman. He was a guardian. He had endured decades of isolation, mockery, and poverty just to keep this secret safe from the parasites who destroyed his name. And now those same parasites had cast her out just like they did to him. She looked deeper into the hidden compartment. Beneath the gold bars lay a sealed parchment envelope. The wax seal bore the coat of arms of the High Court. With shaking hands, she broke the wax. Inside was a document that made her gasp. It wasn't just a regular deed. It was the original, unalterable, sovereign land grant for the entire territory. The document was pristine. It was signed by the state's first governor. But as Maya read the fine print, the true nature of her grandfather's plan became clear. This wasn't just a hidden treasure. It was a beautifully engineered legal trap. The land grant explicitly stated that the territory could never be sold, divided, or commercialized as long as a direct descendant of the Lynn family held the original title deed and resided on the property. If the land were ever wrongfully seized or transferred to non-family members, all corporate assets built upon it would automatically forfeit to the state, and the perpetrators would face immediate federal asset seizure for high fraud. Her cousins hadn't just stolen her home. By filing the fake deeds at the town hall earlier that week, they had walked directly into a trap that had been waiting for them for 40 years. They thought they were clearing out a useless heir. In reality, they were triggering their own financial execution. The clock struck midnight. Maya knew what she had to do. She didn't need to run away with the gold. She needed to present this evidence where it would do the most damage. She packed the documents and 2 small bars of gold into her canvas bag. The storm was clearing, leaving behind a cold, crisp night air. The next morning, the grand hall of the estate was filled with investors. Her cousins, Julian and Richard, stood at the front of the room, smiling broadly next to a giant map of the proposed commercial development. They were about to sign the final contract. "We are proud to usher in a new era for this land," Julian announced, raising his fountain pen. The investors applauded. Richard smiled, leaning against the mahogany podium. They were seconds away from finalizing the multi-million-dollar deal. The heavy oak doors of the grand hall swung open. The sound echoed through the silent room. Every head turned. Maya stood in the doorway. She was still wearing her stained canvas jacket and muddy boots. The contrast between her and the opulent room was stark. "This meeting is over," Maya said, her voice calm, clear, and cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Julian laughed, shaking his head. "Maya, how did you get past security? Look at yourself. You're trespassing on private property. Leave before I have you arrested. Maya walked down the center aisle, her boots leaving tracks of dried mud on the expensive carpet. She didn't look at the investors. She looked straight into Julian's eyes. She reached into her bag and pulled out the ancient parchment deed, slamming it down on the signing table directly over their fraudulent contract. "I'm not trespassing, Julian," Maya said, a cold smile appearing on her face. "You are. And by signing that paper, you just forfeited everything you own to the state." The room fell into dead silence. The lead investor picked up the parchment document, his eyes widening as he recognized the sovereign seal and the unalterable clauses. Within minutes, the investors began packing their bags, shouting at Julian and Richard for exposing them to federal fraud charges. The grand scheme crumbled in seconds. By noon, federal marshals arrived at the estate. Julian and Richard were led away in handcuffs, their faces pale with shock and desperation. They had spent their entire lives trying to steal a legacy they never understood, only to be ruined by the very man they had spent decades mocking. Maya stood on the porch of the grand estate, watching the police cars drive away. The sun was finally breaking through the clouds, casting a warm, golden light across the vast fields. She felt a deep sense of peace wash over her. Her grandfather's name was finally cleared. The valley was safe. She didn't move into the grand mansion. Instead, she chose to keep the old train car exactly where it was, restoring it into a beautiful private library dedicated to the true history of the railway. She used the hidden gold to fund local schools and preserve the natural land, ensuring that her grandfather's spirit of guardianship would live on for generations. Sometimes, the things we think are broken, useless, or abandoned are actually the foundations of our greatest strength. We spend our lives looking for answers in grand places, chasing status and validation from a world that doesn't care about our soul. But true value isn't found in what we take from the world. It is found in what we protect. Look closely at the ruins in your own life. Look at the challenges, the heartbreaks, and the places you've been cast out from. Are they really dead ends? Or are they just the hidden vaults holding the strength you need to rebuild your destiny? The answers are always there, waiting under the surface. You just have to be brave enough to lift the floorboards.